Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is Political Science 1101, American Government. This lesson is from Unit 1, Theories of Government, and is Lesson 9 about the American solution to the problems of democracy. In this lesson, you'll learn about Aristotle's polity. You'll learn what a republic is. You'll learn about America's mixed form of government, and you'll learn what a deliberative republic is. Now, let's begin with a question. What did Aristotle think the best form of government was? Remember that he proposed the theoretically different types. Rule of one, that could be either selfish or selfless. Rule of the few, that could be either selfish or selfless. And then democracy, which he considered to always be problematic and even selfish. Was there anything that he thought was good? Well, for Aristotle, the ideal form of government was what he called a polity, which is actually a form of democracy that he imagined, but one that would be dominated by the middle class. So rather than all the masses really participating in it, instead the middle part of the country would do it. And hopefully in that way not fall prey either to crazy mobs or to demagogues. But while that was Aristotle's solution to the problem of democracy, of limiting its power to the middle class, America came up with a different solution. What was America's solution for the best form of government? Well, to understand that, we have to realize that America's founding fathers believed in popular sovereignty, that the people were really in charge. They were the ultimate authority in society. But at the same time, they were desperately afraid of democracy, of actually giving the sovereign the power to make laws. While they knew government had to derive its power from the consent of the people, they were frightened with what the people would do with that power if they exercised it themselves through the mechanisms of democracy. So the founders instead embraced a form that's similar to democracy, but isn't quite actually democracy. And that is something that we call the republic. Here is a quote from James Madison, one of the founding fathers, who explains, in fact, not just one of the founding fathers, perhaps the founding father. He's sometimes referred to as the father of the Constitution because he was the central figure at the Constitutional Convention. But that's a digression for right now. We'll talk about that more later in the course. But James Madison said that this new government that was created for the United States of America was a republic. And by that, he meant a scheme of representation. So rather than being a democracy where the citizens actually control the government, instead the United States of America is a republic where the citizens choose representatives to be in the government. That's why our country sometimes, when people don't want to call it a republic, describe it as representative democracy, which, if you use democracy as it was originally meant to be used as a word, that's a little bit contradictory, representative democracy. But what they're doing is they're trying, when people use this term, they're trying to acknowledge the fact that the people are in charge, but they don't exercise that power directly. Instead, they choose others, their representatives, to do it for them. Well, if we have in this country not a democracy, but a republic, well, where does that system that we have fit into, that structure that we have, fit into Aristotle's schemes of government? Do we end up having a republic where we choose one person to rule over us? Or we end up choosing a few to rule over us? Or is the power really exercised by masses of people? Well, let's remind ourselves of those divisions that Aristotle had and he proposed. If you look around in America today, as we already discussed just in this lesson, we don't really have democracy ruled by the many. Arguably, we don't really have an aristocracy or an oligarchy because the people are really in charge through their voting. And we don't really have rule of one. We have a president, but he's not really a tyrant or a monarch either. But in some ways, you could argue that what they did, the founding fathers, when they created the United States of America, was they solved the problem of the negatives and positives of these different potential forms of government by trying to combine them together, each with just being represented partially in their fulfillment. And in that way, they hope to get the positives without the negatives. So, with that in mind, in America, we sort of have the rule of one. It's the president, the office of the presidency, a single person who is in charge of executing the laws of our land. We also arguably sort of have rule of the few, the United States Congress, which makes the laws for our land. They're an elite few who we hope are representing the needs of the masses rather than of themselves. And then we also sort of have rule of the many, by voters going into voting booths and choosing who their representatives are. They are the ultimate power in society still, even if not the direct power in the society. Well, if that's the structure of our government, a mix between all of Aristotle's form, well, what is the process by which our American Republic functions? Well, a concept that can help us understand is described as a deliberative, I just screwed up the lesson almost. Okay, first of all, our question is, what is a polity? This is our first review question. By that, did Aristotle mean a middle-class dominated democracy? Did he mean the political community? Did he mean popular government? Or did he mean a police state? For him, the best form of government would be a middle-class dominated democracy where, yes, the people were in charge, but the power was lodged in a certain group of people that he thought best able to be moderate, not extreme or crazy with their power. Next, what is a republic? Is it a country without a king? Is it an aristocratic government? Is it representative democracy? Or is it a political party? Hopefully you remember that it is representative democracy. Now again, I've explained this already, that term isn't exactly accurate. It's a little bit misuse of the word democracy, but it's how people understand it. You say democracy, they realize the people are in charge. You say representative, they realize that they're using their power to vote people in to represent them in government. Which of the following best represents the notion of an American monarch in our mixed form of government? Is it George Washington? General Eisenhower, the general from the Second World War? The chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank? Or is it the presidency as the office? Well, the American monarch, so to speak, in our mixed form of government is the presidency. Whoever happens to be there, not just George Washington, but any man or woman who's sitting in that office as the President of the United States serves that role of sort of rule of one. Well, what about the American aristocracy? Who is that? Is it the United States Congress, billionaire business owners, the Trilateral Commission, or the Federal Reserve Board? Well, that small group of people that are ruling society, hopefully for the benefit of us all, would be the United States Congress. Opinion polls, or in the actions of voters in national elections, or in every citizen. I got a little bit ahead of myself there, clicking the button, so you already saw the right answer, but hopefully you already knew it. And that is that in our American mixed system of government, the idea of democracy is talked about Aristotle, expressed in the will of the voters in our national elections as they choose others to represent us in government. But in making that choosing, they are exercising ultimate control over that government. And our last concept from this lesson is, what is a deliberative republic? Is it a quickly functioning form of government? Is it a set of rules to prevent easy majorities? Or does it actually encourage majority rule? Or is it focused on civil liberties? Well, hopefully you'll remember that that word deliberative is about being careful and slow. And you can recognize the correct answer here, the best answer, as rules that prevent easy majorities. Remember, we don't want our sort of democratic government to listen to the passions of the people and just immediately do stuff that may be crazy. We want it forced to be slowed down to slow down and be more considerate in what it does. Okay, that completes our lesson 10 of Unit 1. Next in Unit 1, that completes our lesson 9 of Unit 1. Next in our Unit 1, we'll have lesson 10, which is about the origin of ideology.